Welcome to the Complete AI Guide, your commute-friendly podcast brought to you by georgeabmatthew.com. We are uninterrupted and ad-free, and we are also, therefore, independent, an independent voice of AI. Like, follow, share, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. In today's episode, we are looking at our research to understand why public sentiments are diverging from the corporate enthusiasm we keep hearing regarding artificial intelligence. It really is a massive gap right now, whether you are enthusiastically using AI right now or you are feeling a bit anxious about its reach. This episode is going to decode exactly why this resistance is happening and how leaders absolutely must navigate this chasm to build trust. To really set the scene for the sheer speed of this shift, we only need to think back to December 2025, barely any time at all. The architects of AI were celebrated globally as the People of the Year by Time magazine. This massive concentration of power in the hands of a few elite tech executives was praised, treated almost like modern Prometheans, handing fire down to the masses. But then fast forward to a couple of months to February 2026, the cultural barometer had completely flipped. Major media covers were literally titled The People versus AI, featuring stark portrait photography chronicling a massive, rapid coalescing grassroots backlash against the unchecked expansion of the industry. The narrative shift from technological inevitability to aggressive public contestation almost overnight. That is a massive pivot in public consciousness, to go from celebrating these architects to people versus AI in a matter of weeks, both by Time magazine. Something fundamentally broke in the relationship between the creators of this fascinating technology or collection of technologies and the everyday people meant to use it. The scale of that breakdown is captured perfectly in hard numbers by a massive global study. Surveying 48,000 people across 47 countries revealed a landscape plagued by low AI literacy, weak governance, incredibly fragile trust. Globally, only 46% of respondents actually say they trust AI systems. Less than half the globe trusts the very technology being heralded as the next industrial revolution. When you think about billions or trillions of dollars being poured into this, a 46% trust rate is essentially a failing grade in public relations. So when you look at specific regions, the tensions becomes incredibly acute. Here in Australia, for example, 65% of the population believes AI creates more problems than it solves, making an 8-point rise in negative sentiment just since 2023. The standout statistic here is that 25% of the population in Australia view AI as an outright existential threat within the next 20 years. And the number actually spikes to 32% among those aged between 25 to 34. So a third of young professionals, the exact people who are supposed to be building their careers alongside these tools, are essentially looking at this tech and seeing an existential threat to their future. There is also a fascinating political divide in advanced economies. Places like the United States, Italy, Australia, Brazil, and Greece, roughly half of adults are more concerned than excited about artificial intelligence. They see what they have to lose. In these higher income nations, AI is increasingly seen as a destabilizing force threatening economic security. Conversely, polling shows that in emerging countries, places like India, Nigeria, also some parts of Brazil, depending on the exact metric or demographic you're looking at, you see 75 to 80% adoption rates. In those regions, technology is viewed as an incredible leapfrogging opportunity and a chance to bypass legacy infrastructure entirely. But in the advanced economies, the perceived risks of losing what they already have are heavily outweighing the promised benefits. Which brings up a really pointed question. If the stock market and tech CEOs are out there constantly claiming we are entering this golden age of limitless productivity, but the average person in the advanced economy is feeling the exact opposite, we have to figure out where the disconnect is. Are people fundamentally misunderstanding the technology, or are they experiencing a reality that executives are completely insulated from? Our research points firmly to a reality gap. The friction is being felt most acutely in people's wallets and their job security. And we are looking at a scenario where towering macroeconomic optimism is clashing violently with the individual day-to-day precarity. So let's map out the macro optimism. Global job barometers show 56% wage premium for workers with AI skills. And this is according to a PricewaterhouseCoopers study. On top of that, industries highly exposed to AI are seeing revenue growth per employee 3 times higher than low exposure sectors. Economic forecasters even project a net gain of 78 million jobs by 2030, projecting 170 million new roles created versus 92 million jobs being displaced. But workers aren't blind. They recognize the short-term utility. Maybe a tool helps them write a report twice as fast today, but they suspect that by using it, they're essentially training their digital replacements for tomorrow. It's like being told by national economists that the country is experiencing a massive boom, but your specific bank account is draining. And they are seeing corporate restructuring announcements happen at the exact same time as these so-called AI efficiency rollouts. And they are doing the math. And data adds an important psychological nuance to this point. About 40% of people in the US and the UK fear widespread job losses in the broader economy, but only 20% actually fear for their own specific role. It's less about definitely getting fired tomorrow and more of a feeling that the whole system is slowly breaking down around them. It indicates a broad systemic dread. People are worried about erosion of the middle class, generally economic stability, and growing decoupling of capital from labor. The macro narrative being sold to them points to endless growth, but their lived narrative is one of absolute precarity. So when people feel that kind of deep economic vulnerability, they start looking for the mechanisms causing it. And because when you feel financially trapped, AI stops being viewed as helpful or as a helpful piece of software and starts looking like an enforcement mechanism for elite control. The sociology data backs that us completely. This public resistance is deeply tied to global cost of living crisis. Research explicitly links financial hardship as a feeling of powerlessness to a much higher susceptibility to conspirational beliefs. When things feel out of control, you look for who is controlling it. As inflation and unaffordable housing erode personal security, a person's sense of agency declines. And when institutional trust collapses, people naturally look for explanations. The research shows several narratives where AI is framed as the ultimate enforcer of this hardship. For example, there is a growing view of AI as the engine of a surveillance state tracking everyday citizens. There is also a reinterpretation of the 15-minute cities, originally an urban planning concept about having amenities within walking distance. Through the lens of economic anxiety and algorithmic distrust, it is being interpreted as by some as digitally monitored restricted zones meant to control movement. There is also a narrative of engineered obsolescence, the belief that AI-driven job loss is entirely intentional, aimed at forcing population control and dependency. So to be absolutely clear, we're not validating or endorsing any of these theories, but we have to acknowledge that the research that shows that these narratives are gaining serious widespread traction as a direct psychological reaction to the economic pain. And when people feel squeezed, they project that loss of control onto the technology. And honestly, that distrust is further widened by the rhetoric frequently coming from the top. When pressed on massive energy and water consumption required to train large AI models, certain industry leaders have compared those resources to the decades of food, water, and education required to train a human being. And they essentially dismiss the environmental concerns as simply the cost of creating intelligence. Equating the millions of gallons of water required to cool a massive server farm to raising a child fuels an enormous backlash. Critics argue the analogy reduces human beings to inefficient biological machines, feeding directly into this existing public fear that AI leaders hold a strict utilitarian worldview, one that prioritizes computational progress over actual human life and local ecosystems. In parts of the US, citizens have successfully blocked new data center projects. They're refusing to sacrifice their local environmental stability and political utilities to support highly profitable AI systems that they feel primarily benefit distant corporate conglomerates. When ordinary people are struggling to pay their own utility bills and they hear that tech companies and their leaders equating human development to a server farm while literally draining the local water supply, it stops being a debate about technology and starts feeling like a class warfare. This is exactly how it is being perceived by a growing segment of the population. It's fundamentally about control and fairness, but the loss of agency isn't just about macroeconomics or the local water supply. It's invading the home, and it's triggering a fierce protective reflex among young parents. You would think the younger generation, the ones who grew up with an iPad in their hands and live their entire lives online, would be the biggest champions of AI integration. But the research shows the exact opposite. We are seeing a powerful generational immune response. Millennials and Gen Z, the original digital natives, are actually becoming some of the staunchest techno-pessimists. They have lived through the mental health tolls, the loneliness, and the social fragmentation driven by social media algorithms over the last decade. And now they're entering parenthood themselves, and they're fiercely fighting digital saturation for their kids. They have seen how the algorithmic sausage is made, and they don't want their kids eating it. We are seeing parent-led movements gaining incredible tangible momentum. They are successfully pushing for school phone bans across jurisdictions in the US and here in Australia. Within this context, generative AI is viewed by these parents not as a cool innovation, but as a dangerous escalation. Things like AI companions, AI tutors, and emotionally responsive chatbots are seen as algorithmic harms that weaken a child's independence and emotional development. They do not want a machine replacing human connection for their kids. It's prompting this highly intentional effort to reclaim what they call analog childhoods that are completely free from algorithmic influence and digital surveillance. It is incredibly telling. And it's like the very first generation raised entirely on fast food has grown up, realized the long-term health impacts, and is now demanding a strictly organic diet for their children. They are actively and aggressively rejecting the digital diet. And the anti-movement is rooted deeply in that protective instinct to safeguard human development from technologies perceived as experimental and addictive. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this profound societal anxiety, the economic fears, the environmental anger, and the parental protectiveness, none of that magically disappears when people clock in for work at 9 a.m. You don't just hang your existential dread on the coat rack when you walk into the office. You carry all of that anxiety into every meeting and every software rollout. It fractures organizations from the inside out as companies try to push rapid AI adoption to chase those productivity gains. They are colliding head-on with this complex human reality. Inside a typical company, our research breaks down the modern workforce into 6 distinct behavioral types that leaders have to learn to identify and manage. First, you have the evangelist, and these are your vocal early adopters. They see AI as cure-all, but the risk here is they often ignore security and bias protocols. They need strict guardrails to prevent what we call shadow AI, which is basically when employees start secretly using unauthorized public AI tools for confidential company data just because the official enterprise tools are too clunky, or the organization is too slow to respond to AI. The evangelist will bypass systems just to get the job done faster. Second, you have the natives, and these are the quiet, pragmatic users, and they don't make a big fuss. They just naturally integrate tech into their daily workflow, and they are fantastic for organic peer mentoring because they make the tools look normal and approachable. And third, we have the migrants, and this is the largest and arguably the most decisive cohort in any organization. They're willing to try, but they are highly uncertain. They absolutely require psychological safety and structured upskilling. And if they don't get that support, they quickly develop anxiety and disengage entirely. Enterprise success lives or dies with the migrants. And fourth, we have the agnostics. And these are the passive skeptics. Abstract promises about the future of work to do nothing for them. They only move for proven, tangible productivity gains that make their specific day easier. Show them the value or leave them alone. Fifth, you have the rebels. These are outspoken principal critics, and they are the ones raising their hand in all hands meetings, worrying about the ethics, data bias, and privacy. While they can be challenging for management, they actually act as a healthy, constructive internal immune system for the company. They force you to ask if something is actually ethical before deploying a massive new system. Better to have a rebel catch a bias issue internally before it becomes a front page PR disaster externally. And finally, we have the sixth tribe, the saboteur. It is the most dangerous group, and they are driven by a deep visceral fear of redundancy. Because of that fear, they don't just complain, they covertly undermine pilots, intentionally withhold institutional knowledge, and might even subtly input bad data to prove the AI doesn't work. You can't fire your way to psychological safety, and you certainly can't threaten someone into trusting a machine. The only way to manage saboteurs, guide the immigrants, placate the broader societal backlash for leaders is to completely abandon the narrative that AI is inevitable. Telling a terrified workforce, get on board or get run over, only fuels the resistance. Instead, leaders must forge a completely new social contract with their employees and their communities. So this brings us to the 7 mandatory actions for leaders outlined in our research. Number 1, rebuild trust through radical transparency. You have to fix opaque decision making so people don't feel like AI is something being done to them in secret. Stop hiding the AI rollouts and restructuring plans behind closed doors. Number 2, deliver immediate localized value. Stop the abstract 10-year horizon promises. You have to show how it helps the specific worker today. Find their specific pain point. If Jim in accounting spends 3 hours every Friday doing tedious data reconciliation, you don't sell him on the future of work. You automate that specific task and you give Jim his Friday afternoon back. Number 3, protect economic dignity and job security. You have to address the fear of redundancy directly through aggressive reskilling programs and intentional role redesign. Number 4, address environmental and community impact. Companies have to stop being extractive. You cannot impose massive power and water infrastructure on a community without their active consent and partnership. Number 5, protect children and human development. Companies building these tools must acknowledge and address the fears of psychological harm early rather than waiting for legislation. And if you build tools that parents view as toxic, you're building a product with an expiration date. Number 6, humanize leadership. The alienating, dehumanizing tech rhetoric, like comparing human beings to server farms, has to stop immediately. Leaders need to speak to the human experience. And number 7, create a new social contract inside the organization. Internal resistance is just a mirror of societal distrust. Bring genuine community and workforce participation into the decision-making process and let the employees help design how AI is used in their own departments. So the solution to AI resistance isn't a better software rollout, a more efficient large language model, or a flashier PowerPoint presentation. It's fundamentally about proving to your workforce and your local community that human worth is still the ultimate priority. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as we wrap up today's episode. If AI adoption is currently stalling out because of this massive systemic trust deficit, consider this. What happens to the organization that simply choose to ignore this new social contract? Will the ultimate competitive advantage in the age of artificial intelligence actually turn out to be profound, undeniable human empathy? And that's all we have for this episode. Thank you for joining us on the Complete AI Guide podcast. Like, follow, share, and subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode. And don't forget to check out our website, www.georgeabbeymatthew.com. And through our website, you can access all the research and statistics that I have quoted to you today. You can join my long form newsletter and sign up to access in-depth analysis, commentary, exclusive resources. You can also read exclusive board papers, papers that I write for executive teams and board directors. You can register for one of my upcoming master classes or read the book, The Complete AI Guide for Small and Medium Businesses. And of course, if you're threatened by AI rollouts or disillusioned, please ask for a coach. You can do all of that through my website. Thank you again. And this is George Matthews signing off. See you shortly. Bye-bye.